Welcome everyone today to episode 2 of the Brotherhood of the Fly. I have Mr. Qualtieri up there in the left hand corner, and to the right hand corner Mr. Bowen, both in California. I'm calling from New Zealand. So thanks for coming along and joining us today. We've got a bit of a special show lined up today. Later on we've got Harold Crossley from Clearhorizon Miniatures coming on board, and he's going to spend a bit of time with us talking about himself, his background, and how, when, why Clearhorizon Miniatures, his little company, also in California, came into existence in the world of 15mm sci-fi miniatures. So to kick it off today, though, we're going to spend a bit of time talking with Josh about some of the Zombiesmith lines. We've been meaning to delve into a few of his products in his range, his portfolio, over the last few weeks, but now we're going to take that opportunity. So I'd like to start, normally people associate Zombiesmith with the Choir, but today I'm going to throw a bit of a different spin on it, Josh, and let's talk about your world of, is it a Gaptus?
Yes.
A Gaptus. Okay, the Shield Wall, Shield Bash world.
If you have a New Zealand accent, that's how you pronounce it, yes.
Okay. Okay, so yeah, the world of a Gaptus, the world of Shield Wall, being the first publication, the first published miniatures line for this particular IP. I'd like to go into that, Josh. So, can I start by asking, how did the world of a Gaptus come into being?
Sure. So, I can't tell you how many years ago it was, 3 or 4 at this point, because we've done 2 books, a 3rd book. Yeah. So probably about 4 years ago, one of my coworkers at Pixar, Jonathan Hoffman, we had like an internal art show at the studio, and he had these really cool sculptures. And if you look up Jonathan Hoffman maquettes or whatever, you can find some of his stuff. And he hadn't done any Shield Wall stuff, but he had all these other sort of figures. So I got him to do a couple of, like, I don't know, 12-inch tall Quar that I think I've posted on the forums or whatever. And Sequoia has one, and Anthony has the other. And then I just started talking to Jonathan about collaborating on the Shield Wall project with me. I had some ideas for designs for characters, some rough sketches, and Sequoia and I were super busy on Quar, and I had been reading the Saxon Chronicles books by Bernard Cornwell. Just came out as a TV show on BBC The Last Kingdom. I'm obsessed with those books, and I really wanted to do a Viking game, but I had to put our spin on it. So I wanted to do Viking Muppets, right? So so Jonathan and I did a whole bunch of work, back and forth with him doing designs and me giving notes and world stuff, and then Anthony and I came up with what I think is a pretty different fantasy mass battle kind of rule set. When you play Warhammer Fantasy, or I guess Age of Sigmar now, and you've got your blocks of troops, they would come together, and you would roll some dice, and you'd pick figures off the back, and that was sort of combat. And like, for a game that's about combat, that is actually the least interesting part to me and to Anthony about Warhammer Fantasy. So reading the Saxon Chronicles books and the Shield Wall combat stuff and all the tricks and things they would do, we thought it'd be more interesting to have all that sort of model combat tactic stuff at the actual point of contact. So in Shield Wall, you still maneuver your units around, but when they come together, you actually try to slice into the enemy line and split it, and there's multiple combats, so you're both doing casualties at the same time, so we would both roll dice depending on who's engaged. And we have this concept of a cascade that is, if I do more wounds than you, even if it's not my turn, then I get another attack, and these rounds of combat go back and forth until there's no wound. So it makes it this super dynamic thing, and after you play a while, we kind of term it lethal Tetris, right? Because you're cutting troops in, and because everything's on square bases, so there's some regularity to the movement and some rules about how it all works.
Cool. So it's a really defined differentiation from your standard I go you go block battle systems, which was kind of what really appealed to me initially when I first came across it. I mean, I came across Shield Wall before we banded together.
Yeah. So it also, the other key to it is the activation system, and it's now the activation system we came up for that is sort of the standard in all the new Zombiesmith games, and that is it's a card mechanic. So there's a set of cards, there's 9 of them or whatever it is, and they're numbered 3, 4, or 5 for our current iteration of the games. We're about to come out with a game that might have slightly different numbers, But on my turn, I don't actually pick that card. You would pick that card for me, and you would keep it hidden. So as a player, I know I have 3 actions to perform. I might have 4, and I might have 5. And depending on the cards that have come, I might have a good idea of, like, there's a good chance that's a 5 or a 4, or maybe all the 5s are gone or whatever. And so you can't always get everything you want done in a turn, and you can try to risk it because some maneuvers and things take multiple actions and that sort of thing. So it keeps kind of the back and forth dynamic. And so we've used that in Shield Wall, Shield Bash, Netherworld's Edge, Storm of Steel. That's the new activation system for the new Quarter Skirmish game, and all the other stuff we're doing from here on out. You and I still have to talk about Warpod and what activation system exactly we want to use there, because I might want to hybrid this Quarters War and Shield Wall or Shield Bash to do that, but that's not a topic for this.
Yeah, that's
Shield Wall also incorporates the Froth system. Can you kind of describe that?
Sure. So the Froth system is a concept that's important to Anthony and I. I don't like playing games in tournaments. I mean, there's a place for that, and I have no disdain for people that play that way, but I play games to relax.
definitely.
And I want to play with friends and people I like, and I think Anthony and I have a very different philosophy about gaming. That's why some of our games don't even have point systems, which throws some people off. But if you're not super competitive, then who cares? Like,
Yeah.
I actually like that. Anthony and I play a lot of Infinity, and I like if the scenario is actually one-sided against me, even if I lose, because then it's interesting, right? And I get to try things, and then if I win, it's that much better. So anyhow,
Yeah, totally.
so Froth is the way you cheat, and it's not blatant cheating, but you start with a certain amount of Froth, and you can spend it throughout the course of the game to influence die rolls up or down by 1, or to perform certain actions. But also, if you want to do something, because it's hard to cover every situation in miniatures rules. If you want to do something that's not quite in the rules or bends it a little bit, you basically say to your opponent, hey, I want to do this. And if you're asking me, like, can I do this? I'd say, sure, but it'll cost you a Froth or 2 or whatever. And it's sort of in my interest to not be draconian and weird about it, because I want to make sure on my turn, if I need
the same
to do
opportunity.
something, yeah. So, maybe you're a half-inch short of your charge range. We'll spend a Froth and get all the way or whatever, right? And it's just sort of a friendly way to...
A bartering system.
Yeah, in a way.
Puts an economy to...
Yeah, that's freaking awesome.
Yeah.
A gentlemanly, competitive bartering system in-game to sort of deal with the other nuances or
Right.
sort of things that you'd otherwise have difficulty with.
Right, and it also gives you a little bit of a resource to manage, because there are some things in the game, for instance in Shield Bash, to charge another character, you actually need a point of Froth. So you can move up and then attack, which is 2 actions, or you can charge for 1 action and a point of Froth. And that sort of measures the morale and momentum of your force, because you gain Froth by completing objectives or killing other figures or a couple of other ways. So if you're doing well, then you're generating that Froth and you can use it. If you're not doing well, it's almost sort of a morale system for your troops. They start to degrade a little bit, and they don't do exactly what you need them to do every turn. And that to me is a more interesting way to measure morale than just rolling a couple of dice and, I rolled a 3, so
Yeah,
it's over.
and it really adds to the narrative. I find that the Zombiesmith game systems, especially the ones now based on your new engine, the Shield Wall engine, are highly narrative and theme. Even though you have that numerical bartering system with your Froth points, it all adds to the narrative, and it makes it feel... It takes on like a personality. The game itself takes on a personality which is different in every single situation. But I love the narrative, and I love the narrative drive and the focus that you're pushing this new engine through. Obviously it started with Shield Wall, the mass battle system. Then you've sort of broken it down to the skirmish size system, which it just adds even more flavour to that. Now it's followed through into Netherworld's Edge and so on and so forth. It's really I dig how you've pioneered this engine, and it's just. With every iteration, you're adding to it. There's new situations, new circumstances which you have to overcome, and it's like a living engine.
Well, it's actually. Go ahead, Jonathan.
I was just going to mention that there's a video on your YouTube channel that gives a brief kind of example of the combat. I think Anthony did.
Yeah, that needs some videos.
There's that one for Shield Wall, and there's one for Shield Bash that we've had for a while that I just need to finish editing and get it up there because we recorded it. And so the interesting thing about Shield Bash to me is, you play with, this is the skirmish version of the War of Ashes universe. You play with 5 to 15 figures per side, and if we both know the rules, we can play a complete and satisfying scenario in half an hour. And so we sort of built it so that you could do a whole campaign in an evening. Ganesha Games, which we used their system as a core for Songs of Our Ancestors. I mean, that's sort of a idea they had that we really liked. So we built it so that you could play 4 or 5 linked, what we call them tales, in an evening, and actually maybe get a complete story, right? A first, a second, and a third act, and a climax, and all this other stuff that goes on. So the narrative stuff has always been very important to everything we do. Ultimately, I love to tell stories. That's why I like the world building aspect of this, and so I just want to make sure all that stuff comes across in the actual rules as well. That it's not just dry and some D6s, but there's some room in there to tell your own stories and happenstances.
All right, let's talk about the design of the figures themselves, and I won't ask you to go into each faction in detail, but
I will. Start with the Vidar. They're my favourite. They're my poison.
I'll give you the overall. So when Jonathan and I were working on it, the important thing to me, besides the Muppet Viking aspect, is that when you looked at any of the armies, you had a contrast of sizes. So if you look at the Vidar, there's a lot of Vidar, and they're sort of 22 or 23 millimeters tall, and they'll be next to in the Hilde that's 54 millimeters tall in like the same unit, right? It's a big ogre dude. And so I wanted to make sure each army sort of had these weird size contrasts. So it wasn't just a line of troops that sort of blended in, but that there was contrast within the shapes and silhouettes of all the figures. And then within that, each of them, I mean, they sort of fill fantasy archetypes a little bit. I guess we have no undead, but unfortunately, Anton, I'll start with the Elvorks because that's easier.
Okay,
the Elvorks are they're
my second favorite.
Okay, they're sort of us in the War of Ashes universe, right? They're sort of just these normal guys trying to get along, trying not to get the attention of our god, which is a whole other thing we could talk about a little bit. The religion and magic in the War of Ashes universe is a little different. So they're scholars and just sort of your average folk. And then where the Vidar come from is a few hundred years in the past. The Vidar were basically Elvorics, but they were the soldiers of the world, and they basically sort of ruled the land, and the scholarly folk and the farmers were tired of this, so they tricked the Vidar into sailing west in search of the land of gold and riverberries and whatever. So all the soldiers jumped in the boats and they sailed west. 300 years later, they come back from the east pissed off because they did not find the land of gold and riverberries.
They were duped.
But now they're all duped, and they're all inbred now. They've got these giant lower jaws and things.
Hillbilly teeth. Hillbilly teeth.
Hillbilly teeth. So they're basically hillbilly Vikings, and so they are. But they're genetically. They're the same as the Elvorks. They're just inbred. So those are those two races, and then there is the Cold, which are these little eating machines.
Fat dudes.
Yeah, and so the other thing that's going on, we're 86 or 87 years after the Great Catastrophe, which could be a number of things. It could be when the volcano Myrmidon exploded and blotted out the sky. It could be the gods grew angry and are destroying the planet. There's a bunch of reasons for it. Basically, the planet Agoptis is getting colder. And the cold are sort of an ancient enemy. They lived in the frozen north and the frozen south. And every now and then they would sort of roam into the free people's, free sentients, so I won't call the people's lands, and kill them or whatever. And now after the Great Catastrophe, they're actually encroaching on the lands, and they're sort of invading these ever larger hordes because the poles are even too cold for them. So that's the third faction. And so they've got a lot of critters and monsters, and they have some fun gameplay mechanics that as I was talking earlier, some of the figures are on 20 millimeter bases and some are on 40, like the big creatures. And so if a big creature dies, you actually put down a 40 millimeter base of guts. And that is terrain blocking. So, right, if that thing fell down dead, or the ogre fell down dead in your shield wall, you'd have to fight around it, right? You couldn't actually... But if you're a cold player, any unit engaged with it actually has to eat that base before they can actually do anything else, right? Because, like, holy shit, there's some food.
Yep.
And then what happens is you get a little puker. So it's a little cold, he's a little bloated, and he's got these great little figures that he's just... And basically he pops, or he vomits, right? So if you stab him, he explodes and throws stomach acid on everybody around him. Or
take area effect damage.
Yeah, or on his own, he could try to vomit on your front line of troops. And that might actually kill him because he actually ends up vomiting up all his organs as well. So they've got a bunch of fun little stuff. Then there's the Jarl, who are... So they were on the island of Myrmidon where this giant volcano was that blew up, and they've been there. It's sort of like Monster Island from King Kong. Like, people that landed there never returned because basically the Jarl would just make them slaves and not let them get away. And there was a little bit of trade going on, but now they've been driven from their homeland. So there's just a few of them. They've made landfall on the Elvorks and Vidar lands. There's only a couple 100,000 of them, and they're sort of Romanesque. They're not sure how they feel about the gods and religion anymore because their god is actively trying to kill them. So what does that do to your faith? So they're a little more militant. They're a little bigger than everybody else. A little smarter. I don't know so about that.
Yeah,
Then
they remind me of the Tasmanian Devil.
Yeah, a little bit. Yeah, they're little bat wolf guys.
Tasmanian Devil meets Gladiator.
Yeah, exactly.
It's one of the big sculptures too that Jonathan did, right?
Yeah. Well, Jonathan's done one of each. Well, he hasn't done the cold.
I just think that's the first one I saw, maybe.
Yeah. And then the next race is the Kikak, and they are little dragon lizard men dudes. And basically they're super pissed off at the Vidar because somewhere on their journey the Vidar landed on their island, thought it was the land of golden river berries, and caused havoc, realized it wasn't, and sailed off. So they got really pissed and sailed off after them and finally found their homeland. So they're a little ticked off. They have a bunch of... Go ahead.
They're one of my favorites too.
I wonder why.
Well, they're all my favorite.
And Anton sculpted the Kikak.
Yeah, I did the Kikak.
Yeah, Aaron Brown.
Absolute hoot to sculpt.
Yeah, Aaron Brown did all the rest of the stuff. And is about to do more. And Anton's about to do more as well. Their kind of special ability in the game is they have skin of many colors, so they get different stats depending on how you actually paint them. So, of course, red ones go faster. We all know that. But, if you paint them yellow, they're stronger, and if you paint them blue, they have stealth, and so you can kind of customize your force that way. So they have depending on what they're armed with, whatever, they have some basic stats, and then if you paint them a different color, they actually behave differently.
They sort of draw a lot from the Pacific Island tribal theme, or even South American in some examples. But then super cool.
There's the Etronians.
Yep, another favorite.
Agoptis, basically Amazons. So the Elvorics, Vidar, and Jarl, females of the species, are ticked off. They're tired of all these assholes fighting and causing havoc.
Not doing the dishes, not doing the housework.
And the goddess Etronia is ticked off as well. So they've sort of formed their own little nation state, and behind the scenes they've been sort of manipulating things and assassinating and doing all sorts of whatever to try to bring some of the stuff to an end. And we're actually working on our next book. So those figures are out for Shield Bash. They're not out for Shield Wall. Because it sort of makes sense from their fluff point of view that they're mostly in skirmish fights. But the book we're working on, the next book will have them actually in as Shield Wall units. So they're at the point now that they're ready to take the field of battle and do some major, or try to invoke some major changes. Not articulating that well. And also in the end of Shield Bash, we sort of teased what the 6th race would be. So if you look at the back of Shield Bash, you'll see that. That's all I'll say.
That's all you say? Not for us today? That's cool.
Well, it's in the book.
It's in the book. Look in the book, guys. Hey, Josh, you mentioned before you've got an RPG that's been in the works for some time, a role-playing game based in the world of Agaptus, and using all the races and everything else. Can you shed a bit more light on that? Can you throw us some sort of insight?
Yeah, that actually released last week.
Oh, so it has released.
Yeah, so that is
cool. And available via your website?
No. So we partnered up with Evil Hat, who did like the Dresden Files and a bunch of other stuff. They do the Fate role-playing game, and I actually know a bunch of those guys personally. Cool. And one of the things they wanted to play around with is, you know, and I'm not a role player, so I won't explain this perfectly well and maybe inaccurately, so forgive me, is sort of on one end you have D&D, which at this point is basically a glorified miniatures game. On the other end you have things like Fate, which is more storytelling based, more traditional RPG. And I think what Fred was sort of interested in is finding maybe something that pushed Fate a little towards the D&D. So it used miniatures, and so they knew me as a miniatures manufacturer and with some interesting worlds. And so they asked me if we could do something with the War of Ashes stuff. So Sophie wrote a lot of it. I mean, with some input from me in using the histories and stuff. But it's based on the Fate system, and it incorporates miniatures. We did all the art for it. I mean, if you're into the Zombiesmith art, which a lot of people are, there's some existing images in there, but there's probably another 50 or 60 unseen, unless you have the Fate of Agaptus book. So I know you can get it from evilhat.com. I think you can get it from like DriveThruRPG and some of those other things. We basically license to them, so I don't want to cannibalize their web sales, so we don't sell it online, but we'll take it to the shows we attend and everything. And then Aaron has done some figures specific to the RPG. There's some characters that are on the cover and that are used to illustrate examples throughout the book. So we've got those, and we're going to release them in the next week or two. Anthony just has to finish painting them.
Wasn't there also
Sorry?
Wasn't there also a novel in the works?
So there's a novel. Carrie Harris has written a novel, and it is she's finished, and at this point it's actually on me. We have to get it edited, and our editor is pregnant and a little busy. So
congratulations, editor.
Okay. Well,
congratulations, editor.
Yes, it's Anthony's wife, so you can congratulate Anthony.
Congratulations, Anthony.
So she was going to edit it, and life has gotten in the way, and I don't know what her time frame is now, but that's totally on me, and I need to get it done. So I might find a new editor just because she's totally busy and she's going to have a kid, and she doesn't want to be editing my book. So
I'll do it.
No,
you need to be able to read, Jonathan.
I
guess that would be kind of a requirement.
I need it in English, not Bakersfield, right? So.
Ooh.
Yes, I hope to get
found that burn from down here.
I hope to get it done in the next 5 or 6 months.
Cool. I know that the last sort of 6 months you've had a real focal point or a new sort of avenue within the Zombiesmith empire has been directed and a lot of resources put into 3D printing, not just for your own stuff, but and collaborative work, but you're also doing a lot of 3D printing for other companies. Now, the reason I sort of bring this up is your latest releases that I've seen up on your website, the likes of Chiron Expanse and is it the Kami Tale? Looks like it's all 3D printers. Is that all done in-house?
Yeah, so one of my Steel Wool Games employees, David Weinman, is a gamer and into minis, we're into Star Wars, all that stuff, and was playing around with green stuff. It was actually pretty good, but his skill set lies in obviously 3D modeling and stuff much like mine.
Yeah.
So I own a couple of high-end 3D printers now from Kudo 3D. I've got 2 of them, and they're running like 24 hours a day almost, doing a bunch of stuff for us, and I do a lot of contract printing now.
Because you do Onslaught miniatures, the 6mm range it's a massive range of 6mm stuff. You do all their printing. For
the past 2 years, I've done all their casting and printing. So we manufacture all that. So, but yeah, Chiron Expanse and Cami Tail are David's stuff. One is Chiron Expanse is a 15 millimeter kind of hardcore sci-fi. Right now, there's two mechs. Two mech suits up there.
Very nice mix.
50, 55 millimeters tall. But yeah, we printed those, cast them up. There's some jet bikes next, which are super cool. And then probably some infantry. He's got a bunch of designs, and we just got to kind of figure which way he's going to go with it. And I'm sorry, I have the hiccups. Poor timing. It's all that Halloween candy.
Yeah.
And then Cami Tail is more of a... I don't know what the word is, but it's cute little bunnies with giant sci-fi guns. The second faction that is completely printed, and I'm probably behind on molding. I need to start doing that this week. Is actually foxes, and sci-fi foxes with big guns. And so it's cartoony, a little anime, a little tongue-in-cheek. Super awesome stuff. I mean, the bunnies are like little bunny infantry with little hats, and then they've got little motorcycles that they ride that transform into mecha that they ride, with my wife in the background. And then the foxes will have some stuff like that. So there'll probably be like 4 factions, and then there's some deciding to do on the rule set. We might use the bash system, but Davey has a bunch of ideas as well, and so it's either maybe incorporating his ideas in the bash system, which will probably work easy, or we just do something from scratch for his stuff.
Cool. It looks like it's been very well received at the conventions and stuff so far, so be watching that line with bated breath.
Those are printed masters, and then you make molds and spin them in metal, just like you do.
So they're 3D printed, and I said our printers are high end, and basically what I mean by that is you get stuff from Shapeways and stuff, which is cool, but there's a lot of surface detail, right? And the
cleanup work,
and the Z-axis, right? There's a lot, and so the printers we use, which are SLA printers, they use projected images and liquid resin and that sort of thing, are pretty high end. I mean, the print area is super small. I can't print giant things, but there's almost no cleanup.
So you have 2 of them?
Yeah, I have 2 of them.
And they're running pretty much 24/7?
Yes, doing lots of contract printing. So,
do you have room for more? If there, I mean, I know a number of manufacturers who probably love to get in touch with you to discuss options. Do you have the capacity to take on more business in the 3D printing realm? You do?
Yes, I'm taking all the work.
Okay, cool. Well, I'll have to make some inquiries and spread the word.
And I'll cast it all in metal. There's a number of companies we do a lot of contract casting for.
Okay, so you'll print. Can you conceptualize for them, Josh?
Yeah, we could do that.
Yep. Conceptualize, print, mold, cast.
Yep. Cast in metal. I prefer not to do resin just because it's not my skill set. Maybe you can do that for people. But either I'll give you printed masters, and then you go get them in resin, or I'll do the printed masters and do them in metal like I do for Onslaught and a couple other companies.
Yeah, I'll come over and set up a resin plant for you, mate.
There you go. Better use than me.
So cool. Okay, well, so you've got Kami Tail, you've got Chiron Expanse.
Sure.
Are we able to talk about some sort of verbal Napoleonic? Yes.
Yeah. Well, let me just. So real quick, and then we'll get to the new stuff. There's a bunch of 6mm quar that we've got done. There's another like 7 or 8 vehicles. You're working on some new infantry, so hopefully get that up.
I just got them this week, guys. So stay tuned. The masters will be coming soon.
There's 1, 2, 3, 4 new 15mm vehicles. Basically the same vehicles in 6 and 15 because I'm 3D printing those.
Oh, mate, can I just say the 6mm vehicles are amazing. The new Qualtieri stuff, the Royalist stuff, just... You shut up, Josh. I'm telling the crowd. I'm telling the fans of the Brotherhood. Wait till you see this new 6mm quar stuff come out. It's wow, man, it's just nothing like it. So yeah, that's all. Awesome. It's pretty awesome. And I mean, 6mm allows you to sort of experience quar on that whole new level that we discussed in the previous episode. But the stuff just gets cooler and cooler. your prints are amazing, and the quality of the metal castings are second to none. So there's a bit of a plug for you, Josh.
Sure, thank you. Andrew Walters is working on a rule set for that, and we're actually using the bash system for Mass Battle 6mm. It's fairly easily adaptable. There's a couple things we have to work out, so he's working on that, so there'll be rules for that. And then Anthony and I are actively working on a new version of the Quarter Skirmish system, so we'll keep Songs of Our Ancestors around, and we'll keep any new figures, we'll do stats for it, but we're also converting Shield Bash over to a gun game, which we did in turn with Storm of Steel. Was sort of like version 1.5 of Shield Bash, adding some firearms and stuff, but now with Quora, we're adding fire teams and vehicles and a bunch of other things, which is why we have to figure out if we're actually also going to use that for Warpod. And we'll be putting
some new stuff recently, right?
Yeah, so Storm of Steel is new as of this summer. So it uses the Bash system. It's got a bunch of guns in it, and it's Aaron Brown who sculpted the Quar. It's his own line, and
he conceptualized the whole thing, right? It's his total design. Yep.
Yeah, so, and where we are right now, and hopefully he'll listen to this, is, I know he listened to the other ones, is, so, a friend of mine, Michael Patrick, who did the art for Netherworld's Edge, and I kind of stepped in a little bit, because Storm of Steel kind of got in hit a roadblock, and Michael and I came in to do some new concepts and new designs, and sort of add some of that whimsy back in. And once we had that done, we did the book. And so the book has stats and art for figures that do not exist. And basically, because Aaron has a lot of stuff going on,
it's got a ton of stuff going on.
We have to see if the lines are going to be popular. So we released the rule book. It's super cheap. We charge like $5 for the printed rule book. The figures are up there, and if we do well enough in sales and there's some interest, that'll get Aaron to do the rest of the figures. So buy Storm Steel and send us kind words, and we'll get Aaron to do more.
Yeah, I was hoping to get, when we get Aaron on the show, have him go into great detail about Storm of Steel. That's why I haven't sort of bombarded you with the questions.
Tap it out with coconuts and Morse code.
yeah. I hear he's working on stone tablets at the moment.
Okay,
he's getting the script together.
Well, he's good at carving, so he's probably
fantastic at carving. He's fantastic.
And we'll be putting the Quar rules up for free, the rules section, in the next few weeks, and it'll be sort of a living document. It'll be bare bones, and then as we test, we're going to add to that document and get whatever feedback we can from other folks until we actually finish the book, and try to target the book being done maybe next summer.
Will that replace the old rules, or will it just be kind of a new set?
Well, we'll still sell songs, because there's an awful lot of people out there with Songs of Our Ancestors
that play it avidly.
Yeah, and they play it avidly. So any new 28mm or 15mm Quar that aren't already covered in the stats, we'll make sure to stat out for Songs of Our Ancestors. But we're basically, we did this thing where we retired This Quar's War. So basically, the PDF of This Quar's War is free now and forever. You can still buy the book because that costs me money. You have to pay for it. And Spats and Pedrails is the supplement book for This Quar's War and Songs of Our Ancestors, and so we're going to retire that in the next couple weeks and make that PDF free, just because why not? I'm in the business of selling miniatures, not rule books. To me, and this may sound strange to people, but it shouldn't. Is really, rule books are advertising for miniatures. That's what Games Workshop.
A portal into the world.
Right. I mean, we love doing the books and the fluff. Obviously, that's why we do it. But my margins are very, very low on that book, and you're only going to buy it once. But hopefully, you buy a whole bunch of miniatures. So it's actually basically a marketing expense to give those away for free when we can.
A lot of people collect rule books.
Yeah.
That's super cool, guys. Because I mean, I've worked for companies, and I know there are a lot of companies out there that their focus isn't so much on it is on the miniatures, but at the rate that they continually recycle the same used material, I mean, I know of one World War II popular 15mm system that just makes a fortune out of rehashes of rehashes of rehashes of rehashes and the same stuff in every single release. It's just a breath of fresh air to me to see a company that, it's offering fantastic figures, but a very inexpensive or even in most cases free portal into these worlds. Which is not just source material for a miniatures game, it's source material for your RPGs and a ton of other things. If anything, it's a fantastic resource for conceptual coolness. You know, you've got all the illustration work, you've got the stories, it's just food for the imagination. So, big win there, mate.
I mean, inject a little bit of Zombiesmith philosophy, and then we'll get on to the new stuff because we're on this wild tangent. The thing for me has always been, since I started this, is I know, for the most part, people that play our games, it's not the main game they play. They play Warhammer, War Machine, Infinity, whatever. We're sort of the games you come to when you want to take a break from that, painting 6,000 orcs or whatever. And I'm totally fine with that. And so we've tried to keep everything inexpensive to get started, right? So the books, are $20, $25. That's what we have to charge. But, you could get a player... You get a book and a starter set and additional figures for basically $50.
Yeah.
And two of you, spend $50 for $100. You both have a complete game and you can play it. And then from there, there's dozens or hundreds of other figures to play. So I've always tried to, I don't want it to be $300 to buy into our game. I want it to be $50 or $25 because you got the PDF for $5 or for free or whatever it is. So that's sort of what we want to do and how we want to maintain is, $50. It should cost what a video game costs you.
Yeah.
Like you go out, you'll buy an Xbox game or a PC game for $50, $75, whatever they cost now, right? It shouldn't be more than that. It shouldn't cost as much as an Xbox, which is what it costs to play Warhammer now.
Yeah, well, it costs that much for the dice.
Yeah, exactly. So, yes, on to the new stuff. So, two of the new things we can talk about involve the two of you guys, actually. So,
what would these be, Josh?
What would these be? Well,
I have no idea.
Hopefully you know. The first one is, what Anton and I have been working on. It's there's not a real name for the universe yet. We just call it Black Fighter Muppets.
Yeah, it's a working title.
There are 3 races in there: the Grunk, the Frung, and the third that I don't even know how to name them at this point. They're mechanical. Yeah. So basically, it's Muppets with muskets and shakos and
robots. They're robot.
Yeah, the third one is robots, but they're sort of not robots. Maybe we'll get into that later.
Different slant.
Slightly different slant. But so anybody that games with me and looks at my game collection knows that I'm obsessed with anything that happens between 1750 and 1815. Right? I'm obsessed with the Napoleonic era, French and Indian War, which I guess is the 7 Years' War if you're not from the U.S.
Yeah,
all that stuff.
Just First World War.
Yeah, exactly. I just love that stuff. Love muskets and swords and sort of the pomp and circumstance. And I'm always asked, well, why haven't you done a game set in that? And I'm like, no, that's actually a really good point. So, right. So I had some designs. The robot that had, and there's already one. If you search the forums, you can probably find a picture of. We call them the Napoleonic robot. And then Anton's been doing the Grunk and the Frung. The Grunk are done, at least for the initial release, except for Cavalry.
Except for the Cavalry.
And Anton is working his way through the Frung right now. I've done some test prints and obviously some casts of the robots, but I'm tweaking them a little bit for scale and size and just making them a little more whimsical.
Can we maybe see some pictures on this video edited in?
I'm hoping to throw maybe some concept art up, Josh, or...
Yeah, I'll give you some concept art you can lay over this.
Awesome.
It's awesome stuff. It's a lot of fun. We've got basically the rules figured out and a bunch of notes, and it's just we were trying to fit it in the schedule, and when am I going to be done, when is Anton going to be done. So that should be, I think when Anthony and I made a schedule a couple weeks ago, we're targeting that for the end of next summer, so like September-ish, maybe. Just because now there's Warpod and Quar and a bunch of other stuff going Maybe sooner. I mean, the figures will probably get out before the rules, just to sort of get them out there and let people get them and think about them. But the actual rule book, I think we're aiming for September. Because there's the same as in Shield Wall. I think there's something interesting to do with a battle line of troops maneuvering against each other. You know, and back then, the officers sort of kept them moving. The sergeants were good for morale and dressing the line and all that other stuff. So I think there's right now it's a little dice heavy, and I'm working on a mechanic to fix that. But sort of randomizing the hits in the line, and depending on how many holes in your line and guys ranked up, it actually affects your firepower until you redress the lines and a bunch of other stuff like that, which costs the equivalent of froth and blah blah blah. So we got some stuff that actually it looks cool and it feels cool. Right now it's a little dice heavy for the casualty allocation stuff, but it's too cool to give it up. So we're sort of playing around with ways to address that.
Cool.
As the sculptor, Anton, can you just quickly describe the design and the look of the?
Oh, okay. Well, with this particular line, Josh provided all the concept art. Was it Stephanie that did the concept art, Josh?
Yes.
Yeah.
So,
Josh is a conceptual artist working from Stephanie, and she's fantastic. She's got a real talent when it comes to sort of large, brutish, hairy, Muppet-esque type characters. And when I first saw the concept art that Josh put through for the Grunk, I think the Grunk were the first ones I ever saw. I was just like, love at first sight. These things are big, hairy, bushy looking. I wouldn't say Wookiees because they're definitely not Wookiees, but they're just like big, hairy bushes.
Right, they're a little spider-like. They have 4 eyes, 2 large and 2 smaller. And anybody knows me, I hate spiders, so it's shocking they're a little spider-like. But they're only spider-like in the eyes, not in the mouth or anything.
They got tusks because it's sort of like a tusk versus horn clash, isn't it?
Yeah. My original thing was teeth are better than horns, and that's what started the war between the Grunk and the Frung, because the Frung have horns and the Grunk
have tusks.
But they also have horns too. But whatever. But yeah, that was sort of the thousands of years ago. That's what started the fight back when they were throwing rocks at each other, and now they've worked their way up to muskets because
that's what you do.
Yeah, that's what you do.
Awesome.
So yeah,
the scale.
28 mil.
Yep.
Yeah, these are actually larger than 28 mil. The Grunk are larger.
Yeah, but it's 28
That's a 28 mil system.
Scale,
yeah.
Right. The scale is 28. The Frung are about 25 or 28. The Grunk are about 40.
About 40 mil. So they're big boys.
Yeah. And the robots are getting a little smaller. They were about 45 to the top of that hat, and
you printed them smaller.
Yeah, so I'm rescaling them so the top of that hat is basically eye level with the Grunk.
Ah, cool.
So they're in between the Frung and the Grunk in sort of height without that giant stovepipe hat at this point.
Cool, super cool. And there's a possibility of other scales too in the future too, right, Josh? Depending on how well the initial...
It'd be a beautiful 15mm game.
Yeah, would. Mass ranked battle 15mm Grunk versus
and
Frung would be super.
That would allow us to do... I've got ideas for... we're already working on Cavalry in 28, but I kind of want to do the same thing there that we did with War of Ashes, where you got this contrast of sizes that, we've got cannon, but maybe you've got cannon on the back of big creatures, and then instead of 3-masted sailing ships, we've got bigger Muppets that they ride on and whatever, and so you got this success, not orc-like, like the Squiggiths or whatever,
no.
but
these are a design all of their own.
Yeah, but just sort of that same idea. So we've just got all these successively larger scales of Muppets running around the battlefield that you can't really do at 28, but it's easier at 6 or 15. Probably not 6 because you can't capture the character as well as you can at 15, but yeah. So that's that, and then
Secret Project number 2.
Right.
I like Muffets. I like the word Muffets.
Muffets? Oh, that's actually not bad. Because Muffets is
Muffets?
Well, that's a slip, but yes, Muffets is good. Thank you
Muffets fits.
And I'll remember.
So
that's not trademarked by the Hensons. Because they're not Muppets, but that's the easiest way to sort of describe them to people.
Yeah.
And so Stephanie, while working on the Grunk and the Frung, I had her work on Muppet gladiators. Muffet gladiators.
Muffets.
And maybe Muffet something else that we won't talk about today. And so
leave that one for later.
The first thing we actually asked Jonathan to do was the Muffet Gladiator line, and that'll be something where we take the Shield Bash rule system and we go the other way, where maybe you've got 3 to 5 figures instead of 5 to 15, but we add a more detailed wound system and a little more dynamic combat, so the characters are moving around, and we do a gladiator game. But why don't you talk a little bit, Mr. Jonathan? Because I'm tired.
As a sculptor, I definitely got excited about taking the project on. I saw a few. Anton gave me some sneaky peeks at the stuff that he'd been doing as far as Muffets, and
Josh gave me permission.
Oh yeah, of course. But yeah, I'm kind of staying in the same vein. I mean, they got multiple eyes and tusks and horns, but kind of throwing my own spin on things. They're fur balls, big, mean, ugly, hairy fur balls.
That's super cool, man. I mean, if it wasn't for the other projects that we have on the cards, I would have loved to have jumped in and helped you with that one too, Jonathan. But just the when I saw that concept art, it's yours, man. When I saw that concept art come through, and Stephanie nailed it, not just with the Black Powder Muppets project that we're working on, you got the Grunk the Frung, but to see the total outpouring from Stephanie's perspective, there's just dozens and dozens of different unique designs, different takes on the same theme, but in such a unique way, and every single one of them, I was just like, man.
She's very creative.
Even if you just did one of each of these species, one figure of each of these species that she had done a concept illustration for, you'd be working on this project for years. Yeah. So I'm very excited about the Arena project, the Gladiator project. I see that having a really unique, fun Zombiesmith sort of whimsical twist on more traditional gladiator games, which there are a few really good ones out there, but this sort of takes a different level. It doesn't take itself too seriously. You have a bit of fun with this one, so I can't wait for this one personally.
I'm definitely having fun making them, and hopefully we get some pictures up. I started making them in clay, but
the polymers.
The future they're going to be in green stuff.
No, that's cool. They'll make Josh's job easier.
Yeah, I can. Sorry to bore the listeners here, but I mean, if you give me the ones in polymer or whatever, I can get it done. I may hate resin, but I can get the masters done that way and then vulcanize them or whatever. So you just send it to me and I'll get it made. I got no worries there.
If you have any more art or any more direction, that'd be awesome.
Well, yeah, if you were sending me images regularly, I'd give you plenty of direction. There's not for that particular project. There's not any new art yet. I think maybe when we get the first batch done, we take a look at the art, see what else we want. Maybe there's some existing stuff there, and we just do that as a second batch, or we go back to Stephanie with the stuff that's done, so she can kind of look at how it's translated. Because she's a traditional artist, right? And she doesn't really understand miniatures and stuff. I mean, she understands computer graphics because I met her. She was one of my students a couple years ago in one of my classes. So she understands computer graphics, but the miniatures world and the traditional sculpting, she doesn't yet know how to concept for something that can actually be sculpted. Right? So she's not thinking about castability and that sort of thing.
That's where we come in.
Yeah,
exactly. But I think the more
the art's beautiful, and I'm sticking as close as I can to it. But because it is kind of loose art, I get to kind of play around and kind of add my own.
Oh yeah, no, I like it loose. I love for me, I've always enjoyed loose art, not modern art. That's too loose, but because then when it's loose, you sort of bring your own
character
biases and everything to it, and you kind of make it your own, right? And so I love loose art. I mean, not just you as a sculptor, but I mean the customer with the book and the rule set and that sort of thing, right? Their imagination and their upbringing, everything gets layered onto that, and they kind of make it their own game and setting. And
which is another signature Zombiesmith aspect, Josh, whether it's intentional or not. Every line that you guys have released, to date, be it the Choir, the Shield Bash, the Shield Wall, there's all that room for the customer not just to invest in the project and the worlds, in the story, but to sort of lose themselves in it, put a piece of themselves in it. And I think that's one of the universal aspects of the choir that makes them so popular.
Well, you watch me on video and whatever, and you think, wow, how does that guy get anything done? Because he seems like a fucking whack job.
Well, and they're right.
And that may be true, but I do spend a lot of time sort of designing and planning all these worlds out to kind of keep them consistent in the way I would want them. And that is something that is important to me, is to have them as
congruent.
Well, yeah, it'll seem strange to say this, but to make sure that the world lives in a box. And you would think, well, that doesn't actually give you the ability to sort of explore, but I think it really does, because if I define the rules of the world, and you get it, then there's a bunch of stuff you can do in that world. But if the box is wide open, then I give you a Black Powder Muppet game, but you want to add an X-wing to it or this other stuff, and people can just make it a mess. But if you give them sort of the look and the feel, and just enough of it to sort of whet their appetite and give them an idea, then people play in that box, and there's a lot you can do in that box. And it's
a real sandpit.
Yeah, I mean, it's sort of hard to explain, and maybe not articulating it well, but I think that's the thing that's important to me, is to build a box, but that box has an open top.
Yeah.
And when you read a little story, a little snippet about something that happens within that world, it doesn't feel like a little box. It feels like this huge universe, and that's what makes you kind of want to paint
explore
the figures.
more.
Earlier, when you were talking about the exploding volcano, it kind of puts a little story behind it all, makes you excited. Makes me want to paint some little lizard dudes.
It triggers the imagery in your head, doesn't it? Triggers the imagination.
Yeah. I mean, that's the stuff, growing up I found super cool.
Yeah.
And so I want to make sure that anything I do sort of also
fits that
has
theme.
that feel.
Yeah, totally.
And it's what helps a lot of the bigger games too, is that they have a backstory that goes,
Yeah, but not to harp on it, but sometimes the backstory is too much, right? Like, you get World War II, and the World War II gamers, and they don't color outside the lines, right? They don't do Americans in red uniforms or whatever, right? Because that is a defined closed top box. 40K's got the nice open top box with customization, that sort of thing, and that's all I'm saying, right? Is that make sure that you don't give the entire story, but you purposefully leave a lot of important elements out. Not key elements, but important elements, so that people can sort of do whatever they want with it and make it their own.
Yeah. Well, gents, we're coming up on the hour. We've got Mr. Crossley coming on shortly, so is there anything you'd like to leave us with, Josh, from Zombiesmith perspective, just to sort of wrap your segment before we drag Harold in and start...
We got to do a Zombiesmith
beating him around the ears.
Another 50 questions to ask you, so...
Well, yeah.
This
will be an ongoing, I think, man. We're just going to sort of delve into the worlds that we create as we go ahead, whether people like it or not.
So your question to me is, do I want to add anything?
Yeah, is there any last minute things you want to throw into today's episode before we sort of open the doors for Clear Horizon?
No. Yeah.
Normally
yeah.
we make
Yeah.
all kinds of fuck ups, Harold. So it's just it's a work in progress, man.
Well, for some reason I can't seem to get my actual image on the TV back there to stay longer than like 10 minutes. So if I have to like press a button to make it come back,
That's cool.
Yeah, I do it. Just,
Well, do you see my beautiful backdrop here?
This is what happened after the banner kept falling down. So the TV's at least attached to the wall. So.
Nice. How's it all going over in LA, mate?
Good, a little warm today. I managed to kick the wife and little children out of the house for at least an hour and a half. So
Good man. You give her the credit card and send her on her way.
Pretty much. Yes. That won't be in there, right?
Yeah, that'll keep her away for at least 3 hours.
Yeah.
Or until it starts declining.
Yes, I think so.
We're just waiting for Boner to come back. So yeah, mate. Thanks for coming on today, Harold.
Yeah, it'd be fun.
It's only early days for this little organisation that we've sort of banded together, but we'll get better. We'll get better tech. We'll get more onto it as time sort of progresses, and we'll look back on these early episodes with great fondness.
Oh, I'm sure, absolutely.
So, Jonathan, this is Harold. Harold, Jonathan.
What's up, man?
How's it going?
I was just saying, so we might as well kick right into it, eh? So, welcome everyone back to part 2 of this particular vidcast, Brotherhood of the Fly, part 2, episode 2, part 2. I'd like to give a warm welcome now to Harold Crossley of Clearhorizon Miniatures, based in Los Angeles. So, hey, how's it going, Harold?
How's it going?
Welcome
everybody?
aboard. Thanks for taking the time out of your schedule today to come and have a talk with us about yourself and Clear Horizon.
I'm very busy, so you know.
Oh, of course, very busy. So let's kick off. Let's kick off with it, Harold. You're obviously in Los Angeles. Can you tell us a bit about you, about yourself, about what you do?
Absolutely. Well, yeah, I'm in North Hollywood, which is just north of Los Angeles. It's a clue in the title. But I've been hobbying probably for too many years now, since about 8 years old. The way I got into the hobby was we used to have Barnes & Nobles, which are called bookstores.
Yep.
And, I don't know if you guys still have them out there, but I think all of them are gone out here.
Yeah, they just closed our last one.
Yeah, we've had a similar situation here in New Zealand with the likes of Dimmicks and...
Absolutely. So I think it was the second edition Battletech box set is what my eye first. And I remember, I think probably for 6 months, every single day, I think I went into that store and looked at that. And one of the days I finally got my mom to buy it for me. And of course it came with all these amazing plastic miniatures, and you look through the rule book and you want to get all the awesome other miniatures. So I had to actually use a phone book and find hobby stores and call 3 or 4 and actually found a local one to myself that sold metal Battletech miniatures. And being 8, 9 years old, my mom actually would take me there, and they had Battletech games, and of course everyone probably early 20s to 40s playing Battletech. And she'd sit in the corner while I played Battletech with all the grown adults for all hours of the night. Eventually she decided that wasn't worth hanging around anymore, so she just dropped me off, and that kept me right into the miniature world of Battletech. And then from that, just like a lot of other people, I think I got second edition Warhammer 40K.
Yep.
Went for that for me. And so at that point, you start building your own armies, and just kind of grew from there. After several years, I think my first real job was actually for Games Workshop. Working
cool.
Their store.
One of the red shirts?
One of the red shirts, absolutely. I think I was 16 at the time. And
was that your first job?
That was my first. I had done some computer stuff before, but other than that, that was my first kind of like, okay, you have an HR department, you have to do what you have to do. And so did that I think twice over 2 summers. And after that, I went to college, came back down, and in between looking for other jobs, I got a job again with Games Workshop, doing a retail store, which I then became a manager. I managed the Northridge location for about 1.5 years, I believe. And at that point, I moved on to real-world stuff and kind of got away from the hobby for a little bit. And probably, 3 or 4 years later, and I'm not entirely sure what exactly got me into 50mm. I was trying to figure it out earlier today, and I think it was actually Ambush Alley. I think I'd picked up some, and actually I think it's you helped me with some Flashpoint miniatures. I think I saw some of your miniatures. Because you did those, correct?
Yeah, Flashpoint Miniatures back in the day. That's,
So
that's going back a while, Harold.
Yeah, and I think those were some of the first 15, 18 millimeter miniatures I had gotten. And I looked into Ambush Alley, and I started picking up 15 millimeters miniatures from Peter Pig. I think I went to Brookhurst Hobbies down here in Los Angeles.
Yep.
And I just kind of continued on that way. I started a blog where I hadn't started Clearhorizon Miniatures yet, but I had, from Ground Zero Games, Critical Mass Games, everybody out there. I kind of started collecting and building and posting them and enjoying the painting and all that.
Yeah. Totally.
And about 2 years ago, a little over 2 years ago, I think I was talking to my wife about what we would do if we won the lottery, because of course that's pretty, that's going to happen. So you got to really plan for this kind of stuff before it catches you.
You do. It's easy. It's easy. It happens all the time.
Yeah, no, you just pick some numbers, right? How hard could it be? So, and one of the things I came up with was to start my own miniature line. Well, then I started realizing that's kind of a stupid thing to wait to win the lottery to do, since while it's not particularly the easiest thing in the world, it doesn't require millions upon millions of dollars. So at that point,
I had to win the lottery to do mine, so it doesn't work for everyone.
I just I did what everyone else does. I went into Hawk.
I mean, I did win the lottery eventually, but no, that didn't actually happen. The way I kind of approach it is I wanted to fulfill needs of 15 millimeter, basically things I wanted that I couldn't find. The first miniature that I actually produced was the drop pod. Now, of course, there's drop pods in 28 millimeter. That's about it, really.
That was the first drop pod in 15, though, wasn't it?
It was pretty darn close. If it's not the first one, it's the first one with that kind of style where you have like an enclosed.
Yeah, and that was for the Helldivers line.
Right, and there wasn't a Helldivers line at the time. There was, and Steve Tyler of Cool Hand Customs actually sculpted that digitally.
So, can I ask a question here? Because I think this will be interesting to people. So, Anton and I come at this a little differently than you do, because we sort of sculpt and cast and do all our own manufacturing, which is not easy for everybody to do. A lot of people do it your way, right, where you sort of source out a little bit. So I think it would be interesting, maybe not right now, but at some point in this conversation, if you talk about how you actually do that, how you got started, like, okay, the drop out was the first thing. How did you even get that going and off the ground and done and on the web? I mean, I think that's there's a lot of people out there that want to make their own lines.
Yeah,
absolutely.
But don't have the resources themselves to do it, and need to do it like your approach.
Absolutely. We know, and Anton knows intimately that I am not a sculptor. I think I tried. I have all the tools and have Procreate and Bees Putty and some other green stuff, and I think I spent about 45
We'll get there, Harold. We'll get there.
I think I spent about 45 minutes the other day trying to put pants on a dolly. And I think about 45 minutes into it, I decided to start burning down my house because I was so frustrated. So there's a reason I call myself a miniatures producer rather than some type of sculptor, because that actually was just to go into that, is that I don't have the skill sets in terms of digitally sculpting or sculpting using putty. Don't really have illustration. I can paint decently because I've done it for so long. But really what I bring to it is kind of an overall vision is what I'd like to do. I have, when you're producing miniatures, you want to have not only a plan of what you want to have, but you also have to have that eye to say, wow, that's a really cool sculpt. I need to have them do something for me. I need to have them do something for me because that's the style I'm looking for. That's the best skill you can have as someone who produces a line of miniatures that doesn't sculpt themselves, is find the right people that when you ask them to sculpt something, you don't have to go, wait a second, this is all wrong, let's start over. You say, okay, that's perfect, I just need this little thing fixed, or I need this little thing fixed. It doesn't require a lot. And, the way I start, and actually, it's a little bit easier now. Even in the last 2 years, it's gotten a little different. And I'm not sure why, but it seems like there's a lot, either more sculptors or easier to find them, because I know, especially, I couldn't tell you how I found Steve Tyler for the drop pod. I think he was doing work for probably some other company, and I had heard his name that way. Or maybe I just stumbled across it. I'm not entirely sure. I was on the miniatures page, a lot. But the biggest thing, especially when I wanted to do the Helldivers, I was putting emails out almost like a job, looking for a job, into all these sculptors that I like their work. Well, the problem when you have really popular sculptors is that they're very popular, especially if it's coming from nobody. They don't know if you're easy to work with. They don't know if you're going to pay them on time, if you're going to pay them at all, if you're going to, if you have, and really I didn't, if you have really no idea how the miniatures are made, you're going to come up with all these ridiculous requirements, and you're not going to realize what you actually need to get cast and molded and sold and make enough to actually expand your line. I was very lucky on my blog, which was fairly popular in 15mm, Clearhorizon Salvage, and I had actually put up that I was looking for a sculptor, and what I had done before that is actually found on DeviantArt a concept art. I was just kind of scrolling through, I like looking at all the pictures, and I found some whose style I liked, and it's called Ulrich. I hope I am pronouncing that properly, because I don't think I've had to actually ever say it out loud. But Todd Ulrich, he did an amazing job. I found him. He was actually still a student at the time, and I think I was his first paying customer, and I kind of introduced him to kind of everybody else, because you have to help everybody out, especially with 15. We'll do a quick tangent here, especially with 15mm. I don't see everybody else as competition. We're all, as long as nobody's stealing anybody else's ideas, which doesn't happen. There's so many great ideas out there. We're all building it for each other, really, when it comes down to it. And I love great miniatures as much as everybody else does. So it's fun seeing all the amazing designs that go out there that I would have never thought about. So anyway, so with Todd, I came up with the Helldiver design. Basically, I took a bunch of images from the internet and kind of said, I like the helmet of this, I like the helm of this, I like the visor of this. Something similar, it needs to be kind of hard sci-fi, etc., etc. At that point, what I did is, after, I don't know, probably 15 emails to different people that I never got a response from for sculptors, I actually put it on my blog that I was looking for a sculptor. And Broderick Campbell of Highlander Studios Incorporated, incredible sculptor, he actually contacted me and liked the concept art and thought he could do could fit into his schedule. And
yeah, Rod's a great guy. Rod, I haven't had the benefit or the opportunity to talk to him directly, but we've sort of exchanged a few correspondence via Facebook, and his stuff is top rate.
Absolutely, I know he does a lot of historical stuff as well on different scales, and excuse me, he really did an amazing job with the Helldivers. One of the, another thing I wanted with the Helldivers is that they have separate backpacks, which, and my lines have kind of gone that way where a lot of them, like from his 80s Ghost team, they actually have separate heads. So you can choose from 3 different heads, or they have different backpacks. And that's because it's something I like, and I think some people may be turned off by that, and I totally get it, because especially when you're doing a gigantic army, it can be kind of a pain in the butt. I do try to make it
drill pin.
Right, and thankfully with with these, because it's designed that way, so you already have the hole where the neck goes. And,
yeah.
But so that's just trying to push it and trying to make it fit the aesthetic that we're looking for. And definitely inspired by companies like Ground Zero Games, who've done amazing stuff. John over there is just an amazing guy. Always the nicest to be. Top-notch quality, quality service, all that kind of stuff.
And he's been around. He's one of the longest serving in this industry in the sci-fi realm, isn't he? GCG.
Years like that, I think.
Yeah, he's been around a long time.
So, once you start developing this stuff, So I'll just kind of use this as a way also to talk about if you're interested in becoming a producer, if you have an idea for miniatures. So you find your sculptor, which I did, and so you sculpt it. I was lucky because Rod actually works with a company called Old Glory USA. And I know there's one in the UK, this one's a little different. They have a casting service. And I don't know if he still does, I think he's moved, but he was close enough that he'd actually stop by and drop off masters to them. So he knew that. So thankfully, I was able to simply go through him for a good casting company. And Old Glory has been
around since Moses.
Exactly, and they do an amazing job. Terry over there does all my mold making. They do. There's several different types of molds. One's for like 3D printed or plastic. You use low temperature silicone. For metal, you use a high temperature vulcanized rubber. I'm just saying these words like I know what I'm talking about, but really I've just learned from Terry. So if they're telling me stuff, I would never know. But it works.
No lies. No lies.
He might just put it in a big thing of sand and cover aluminum. I have no idea, but it works. So heard about it. So I used Old Glory, and you know, a lot of times, because I do have people contact me who are interested in starting their own miniature range, and I very much encourage that. And feel free to email me. Anybody watching this, feel free to email me if you have specific questions. You can get my email address. I'm sure you might be able to put it in the description or just on the Clearhorizon website. And you know, because there are several casters out there. Josh Zombiesmith does casting. He's actually going to be doing some casting with me, which is
Your
nice.
stuff is done. I'm going to ship it Monday or Tuesday.
I wasn't trying to push you into.
Was that a guilty look? Was that a guilty look, Josh?
Yeah, unfortunately, Harold came in is in the middle of doing like Onslaught's next 2 waves and a bunch of other crap. He just caught me at totally the wrong time, so it took me an extra 2 weeks.
Well, and that's actually another excellent point, is that anything in the miniatures world, if they get a deadline, extend it by 3 times, and you'll probably get what it's actually going to be. And the reason is because while there are more and more sculptors and casting companies every day, there's still a very limited pool compared to all the people that want work done.
Yeah.
And, you know, creative company and creative business does not always operate on deadlines very efficient, especially if it's commission work. It's not like you have some guy sitting in your room sculpting for you while you're the boss. It's all communication via email, sometimes a phone call or two. But you have to be patient. I kind of try to set up my releases so that I know if there's a delay, it's just not going to affect me much.
Yeah.
And actually, Josh is doing. It's going to be a new technical coming out. It's a pickup truck, basically, sci-fi pickup truck for militia.
Yeah, it reminded me, even though it's completely different, but it reminds me of the District 9 utility vehicles that the security forces use. Awesome! I'm so wrapped that someone's actually finally done one of them. Or something similar that would proxy as.
Or is that what it is? Because I have like the tailgate, a roll bar, a gun, and I'm like, I don't even know what this stuff is. You know?
It's a kind of a mix between that and the new Call of Duty Black Ops 3. There was a pickup truck in one of the trailers that just
disclaimer. Harold's a massive COD fan.
Yes, Call of Duty. The Hades definitely take inspiration from the Sentinels, that they're called, from the Advanced Warfare game. I do quite enjoy that game, so definitely if there's things that pique my interest, a lot of inspired stuff is inspired by that for sure.
That's cool. We get inspirations from a million different sources.
Absolutely. Well, and for the that truck, I haven't quite come up with a name yet. I probably should do that. But this is actually going to be my first kind of a mixed medium casting. A lot of times what I'll do is the product's either all resin, which I have specific resin casters for that. Right now I use 2. I have Raven Star, which is Chris, does an amazing job. And then I also have been using for the Banshees, my most recent VTOL, Paulson Games, who did the Mecha Front stuff.
Oh, yeah.
Does amazing casting as well. As I've been doing this more, I found it's important to kind of diversify, especially casters and mold makers, but sculptors as well, because you don't want a family emergency, natural disaster, something like that to really kind of shut down your operation.
Yeah.
And what I'm doing here is there are some small parts in that truck, and so I send them to Josh to get them cast in metal. That way it's quicker. It kind of course, because you guys know, but someone watching this might not know, there are the reasons you would have resin as opposed to metal. Resin is very labor intensive, especially with the mold making, but it can take the details. It's not as heavy, a little crisper, it's lighter. So you can do larger, like the large VTOLs I do. I would not do those in metal because it'd be a little ridiculous.
Yeah, weigh a ton.
Absolutely. But each one gets hand poured, put in the vacuum chamber, labor intensive. Whereas you look at the metal, once you get the molds done, which can definitely require quite a bit of skill, you can pour every 8 minutes while it cools down or so a cast of it. And as long as you have your system set up properly, you can do these small parts over and over and over, and thousands of them. You're not gonna wear yourself out too much. So I'm trying to start really taking advantage of the advantages and disadvantages of both when making my models, because then that makes it a little easier for the consumer in terms of being able to metal can be a little bit easier to work with in terms of it's a little malleable. It's super glue's easy. It's easy to clean. Resin can, I wouldn't necessarily say challenging, but it's definitely, it requires a different skill set. Almost anyone can put metal together. Resin, you need a little help.
Resin is a difficult process, even for those who've been doing it for years and years. I prefer metal personally, and I'd love to do metal for everything, but there's some things that you just don't want to even think about tackling in metal. So yeah, but it's like as Josh offers the service, I was more than happy to palm off my manufacturing, or the majority of it, to Josh. His problem. Hey, Josh.
I make more stuff for other people than I make of my own at this point.
Yeah, I know.
All good. It's totally fine. Right? It pays the bills. So
yeah,
all good.
So it all started with a drop pod. Tell me about the rest of the line.
Absolutely. Well, so we got the drop pod, and then
is that resin?
That is resin. Yeah, okay. And it actually has some really tiny pieces, like for the pistons and such like that, in resin. Chris over at Ravenstar did an amazing job with that, and I've been looking to possibly making those metal, but they are so kind of delicate. I don't know if metal would really would work as well for them. It seems to work just fine with the resin. It has a nice kind of springy attribute to it, so that it fits in nicely.
It can flex.
Right.
Tell me, Harold, what's Chris's surname, just in case someone wants to hit them up on Facebook?
Yeah. Now the reason I wasn't saying is because I can't remember off the top of my head.
Oh, okay.
But
just know Chris. Chris at Ravenstar.
Yeah, Ravenstar Studios. Lynch. I'm sorry.
Christopher Lynch, of course.
Yeah. And he's an amazing sculptor. He actually, I think, after the Helldivers, I'm a VTOL fanatic. I'm obsessed with them, if you couldn't tell from my product line.
Hadn't noticed.
Yeah. So Chris actually, not only is he an awesome resin caster, but he's an amazing sculptor. He has been for years. I mean, I know I was looking at some of the Facebook groups, and he sculpted some of the Star Wars, I think they're like 1/6 or 1/12 scale vinyl model kits years and years ago, like Stormtroopers and stuff like that. Just amazing stuff. He actually sculpted by hand the Raven, which is kind of like my medium Blackhawk analog VTOL, and the Sparrowhawk, which is like a little bird analog. So he actually sculpted those by hand. They're just amazing. He also sculpted my Rat, the Econ Assault Transport, which is a little 2-3 person buggy.
Like a all-terrain vehicle.
Absolutely. Now, besides those, and I usually do have of course, we'll talk about the sculpting real quick. There's the physical sculpting where you're using putties, which we talked about earlier, and then there's the 3D sculpting. And you see a lot right now, especially with the Kickstarter, Kickstarter stuff, you see a lot of renders. It can be problematic. I find, personally, my style tends to be, for 3D sculpting, I think it works best for vehicles and hard edge items, like maybe like armored troops. That's not saying at all that you can't do an amazing organic sculpt with them. It just requires a really careful eye for scaling and for details.
Yeah, can I interject really quick? Since I do the 3D sculpting basically for a living, I totally agree with Harold. What looks good in a render is not what looks good as a figure. And I've done a bunch of work over the past year where I have to explain it to people. I'll get a 3D model. I'm like, look, I can print this for you, but I promise you it is not what you want. And there's a couple companies like, I don't want to give away secrets, like Onslaught Miniatures. And what he shows in the render is actually different than what I print. And I think that's more and more as companies do this, I think they're realizing they need a render version because that's what the customer wants to see. But the actual figure and that sculpt needs to be a different thing. So,
yeah, there are countless people that go out there and they like the idea of printing renders and stuff, and then power to them for it. But then investing in machinery and throwing their 3D files through them and just thinking, oh my god, this isn't what I kind of expected, and there's been a lot of disillusionment by that. So you have to do your homework. You have to go with someone who actually really knows all aspects of the business to get that translation.
Well, it's interesting because when you make a miniature, what I've found anyways that works the best, you don't want super realistic miniatures. And what I mean by that is, first of all, vehicles need to look a little bigger on the tabletop than they would be in real life.
Especially 15 mil, right?
Especially 15 millimeter, because really, you see a accurately scaled vehicle on the tabletop, and it looks small. It just does. Because people kind of overestimate the size of vehicles in their mind. But if you stand next to like a car or a truck, and you took a picture of it, it's going to look smaller than what it looks like in your mind. So, people want gigantic tanks, and then people will say, well, you couldn't fit 6 troops in there. I'm like, you don't really know what they do in the military, do you? They kind of push you in, and, they, believe me, I could fit 6 people in there. So vehicles tend to need to be a little oversized, but the details themselves can all be in relation to each other perfectly, which is great for 3D. With figures, I've found, you don't want it, the style I like anyways, you want heads to be a little bit larger, you want guns to be a little thicker, especially a 15mm because it needs to be a point. Details, there's a specific way, you can't have too many details in there, it gets lost, although washes are nice with that. And, I've seen some absolutely amazing, beautiful 15mm printed miniatures that I think are great. So I want to get that out of the way. I don't think they're rubbish at all. It's just very hard to get them correct. So I tend to go, even though, I think my power armor, and I think that's actually it in terms of figures. My large Helldiver power armor was 3D sculpted. But that's more of a vehicle, so it worked out for me. But figures themselves, I've always found the organic look and the alter it in real time you can do when you sculpt it physically. I've always liked that style. So I tend to stick with hand sculpted miniatures, for figures anyways. But I usually get Steve Tyler to do it for me because I found his style. I can give him kind of a brief 1 or 2 pictures I found online that I really liked and a brief paragraph of what I'm looking for, and he can come up with something about 99% of exactly what I was looking for that's totally unique. Usually there'll be 1 or 2 little tweaks here and there. Maybe the size will need to change a little bit, but otherwise, it's super important, to find somebody to work with that your style matches with.
Yeah.
So, but that's the biggest thing, when you want to produce a set of miniatures, especially if you're not sculpting them yourself, to find sculptors that you can work with. And usually, what happens is you'll pay 50% up front, 50% upon completion. I wouldn't be surprised if I was looking for a sculptor to do work for first. It's complicated because they don't really trust you yet, and you can't really trust them yet because things happen all the time.
Yeah, totally.
The best thing to do is to everyone should put their references out there. If you're getting good references from the person, don't be alarmed if they ask you to put up 3/4 first, because they don't want to do all this work. Even if they don't ship them to you, that's still a lot of effort, a lot of time that they put into something that you just don't care for. So
can I just interject here, Harold? I can speak from experience because I'm currently sculpting for Harold on a number of behind-the-scenes lines that he may or may not share with us today. It's totally up to him. At present I'm running about 10 or 11 clients at the moment. You get different grades of clients, just like you get different grades of sculptors, but you'd be right up there with the best of them. I mean, it can be difficult and disconcerting for sculptors to find work because you never find a lack or a shortage of people that want your skills for whatever reason. But what you will find is a lack of people who are prepared to actually pay you for your time. As an artist, it's like kind of the unwritten universal burden of the artist. You never get paid what you're worth, your time is worth. And just because you're an artist, or be a sculptor or a digital sculptor or even a mold maker or a caster, have an art in something. People, I don't know. There's still a stigma attached to it, and people aren't. They don't take you seriously in a lot of ways. Like I've had a number of people over the years have hit me up for lines, and it's like, yep, sure, I can do it, but you have to appreciate the fact that this is my time that I'm investing. So you need that compensation, that balance, and there's been more than a handful of occasions where I've gone through, accepted it at face value, done the work, and then had the client sort of bail out last minute, which leaves everyone sort of with a foul taste in their mouth. But yeah, for other contractual sculptors out there, guys, I couldn't recommend Harold and Clearhorizon, more, because Harold, you've taken us seriously since day one. You've always paid up front. You've been really easy to work with, really easy to work with. and you're more than happy to pay the sculptors for what they're worth for their time. So kudos to you, mate.
I appreciate that. And I probably shouldn't be saying this, but I think sculpting in 15 millimeter and sculpting in general, I think the commission rates are probably too low, to be perfectly honest with you. I'm sure you guys like hearing that, but and don't get me wrong, I couldn't do all the amazing miniatures necessarily that I have done if rates are more expensive. But I think the skill required is definitely it's something that I certainly don't have, and I look you guys who can do it, and it's very impressive. And I think with 15 millimeter, if you look at 28 millimeter scale miniatures, the cost tends to be probably double, maybe 3 times to get it sculpted. 28 millimeter is a little bit more difficult to get into, but retail price is probably 5 times.
Yeah,
is about back of the envelope calculations. I think 15 millimeter is priced very. I go off the market. I also price what my costs are, a reasonable amount of packs to sell to make my money back, and enough money to hopefully make more miniatures. I'm certainly not getting rich by this at all.
Yeah.
If you want to get rich in the miniatures business, you don't go in the miniatures business.
No, you don't.
This is definitely a labor of love. I hope one day to be making a little bit of money to support it completely, but it's definitely 2 years, unless you come out with, Kickstarter really wasn't how it is now when I started. You can get full ranges going if you have an extremely successful Kickstarter. Just as an example, not 15 millimeter, but the new Drop Fleet Commander Kickstarter is going on second day in. It's like $250,000, I think. Yeah. They already had a game out there that was very popular, though. They all put in, I'm sure, their own money and went into debt and all that stuff. So it's not a magic bullet. And after I'm done with this, I'll talk about Kickstarter a little bit more, because I not only run one which was successful, but I've also helped with quite a few others because there are so many questions about it. So I think maybe if we have time to talk about that, we can do that as well. But prices are 15 millimeter. It's very interesting because you get a squad. For instance, my Helldivers, you get 12 of them for $10.99, which is less than $1 a miniature. Now my prices change because it costs different amounts to get different miniatures sculpted, and materials costs go up and down. But I try to do it, as reasonably as possible. The only problem I see is that sometimes, if people aren't being realistic with their pricing of miniatures, that's going to endanger their business in terms of going forward.
Yeah.
And you're going to lose a lot of really cool miniatures because they weren't properly priced in terms of, can you keep up with making more sculpted, getting more tasks? Do you have enough to fulfill that restock order based on the orders you've already done? If you're making every pack yourself and making 25 cents, that's not going to work. That's not going to get your sculptors paid. That's not going to get the casters paid. That's not going to get your business paid. So that's just something that people should be aware of in terms of, why pricing is a certain way is that where it's at. That's where it comes from. It's real simple. Cost to make, cost to produce, and then a little bit extra so you can expand.
One thing I'll add to that, and there's this sort of percentage that's been around for 100 years, and it kind of works out. But it's mostly if you're going to go in distribution. Most distributors are only going to pay you 40 or 50% of your retail price.
Very good point.
So there's this whole thing. You need to price it 5 times your cost. Now it's a little weird with miniatures because you get a chunk of sculpting costs, you got to divide it out, but you kind of have to figure that out. But really, you need to be charging 5 times what it costs, because if you're selling it at 40% and it costs 20%, you're at least making your money back and then some, right? And if you're selling it on the web, like I mostly do, and I think you mostly do, then you have a lot of room there. But I just think, in general, if you're going to be putting stuff in distribution, like a board game or stuff like that, it really needs to be 5 times your cost, or you will go out of business.
And I'll expand on that too, because I actually took Brookhurst Hobbies, where I found Peter Pig. They actually carried my line for a while, and it wasn't 40% off; it was 60%. Many retailers want, especially if you're a smaller company.
40 for a retailer, 60 for a distributor.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So basically, that was I made almost no profit doing that.
Yeah.
Yeah, sorry, I was flipping it around. Like, the distributor pays you 40%, not as 40% off. Yeah, and the retailer will pay you 50 or 60%.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right. Right. So, like, when I sold to Brookhurst, they would get a 60%. Is basically what. So, if people want to see miniatures and box sets in stores, they need to realize that's kind of what happens. Otherwise, there's just no reason, and that's really how the 15mm hobby is going to grow, is because there's going to be, you can be able to walk in the store and see a box of awesome miniatures and go, oh, I want to buy this. I know, in the internet world, hobby stores seem to be losing, touch of reality. But in reality, many, many games kind of pick up from there, and people play games at hobby stores, build, communities there.
Well, I think the difference is you might stumble on something new in a hobby store. It's actually really hard to stumble on something on the internet unless you're specifically looking for it.
Targeting the right forums at the right time, and
yeah.
I hope these episodes, as we go forward, sort of educate the not just other manufacturers, sculptors, and tradespeople within the industry, but the community on a whole. I mean, there's been an artificial sort of expectation on the value of 15mm figure ranges, which have been imposed artificially by certain key players in the industry to the detriment of the collective whole. It's not an easy industry to break into to start with, and it's even less easy, and it's even more difficult to stay in business when you do have to factor in all these other additional exterior costs. I hope that we're able to sort of better educate the collective on exactly what goes on behind the scenes. So there's not that sort of disdain when it comes to paying a certain price point for figures. I mean, I think your figures are very reasonably priced, Harold, as Josh reasonably prices all our ranges as well. But there are aspects in the industry that they have very cheap, obviously cheaper overheads. They sell their figures for a lot, less expensive prices, and it actually hurts a lot of the other players as well, especially those who are relatively new to the industry or trying to break in.
Absolutely, what I like to say about 15mm, and this I think will always probably be true, is that you could buy a unit of Space Marines, or you could buy an army in 15mm.
Yeah.
Probably 3 armies in 15mm with tank details. So if you look at it's in reality, the cost is, especially for luxury hobby item, is incredibly low compared to pretty much any other hobby out there, except maybe 6mm, 3mm, smaller. But you start looking at the costs, and don't misconstrue me in that I say that I'm going to raise prices or anything. I'm very happy where my prices are right now. I wanted to explain why my prices are that way, but it's also something to be aware of. Why sometimes if you think, well, this is just one metal miniature, how much could it cost? Well, the metal doesn't necessarily cost a lot, although that goes up and down all the time. It's getting that miniature to exist is the problem.
It's your mold labor costs, it's your mold material costs, it's your actual metal or resin cost itself, it's the sculpting time, it's the conception time, it's everything. There's dozens of different taps that are trying to suck resources into that one particular figure.
Web hosting fees, it's my time, it's everyone involved. There's 3 or 4 or 5 people involved in making that one miniature. Everyone has to be paid, and
Well, and the other thing you have to think about is, we're all creating things out of our head, and they may be cool to us, but they might not be cool to somebody else, right? And so maybe you spend $2,000 to get a line done, and then
it flops.
You sell 5 packs.
Yep.
Yeah, and you've got to somehow work that risk into the company as well, and in your prices, right? So that you're protecting yourself, so that one bad line doesn't actually take out all the rest.
And just to switch gears a little bit, since unless you have anything else to go on that, I was going to talk about marketing real quick.
Yeah, sure.
So basically, as another thing beyond, so now we have the sculptor. Say we're starting a new company. We have our sculptor we found. our caster we found who's making a miniature. We're getting a cast, and now we want to say we've set up a website. We'll go over that in a moment. But in terms of marketing, that's something I see a lot, especially people who have not done it before. It's hard to do. I was trained by Games Workshop when they were actually in malls, and I would have people coming in that have never heard of miniatures, and you get them to buy a starter box, Space Marines, because it's a lot of fun and it's really cool. If you can do that, you can kind of sell anything to anyone. And so I've used those skills and kind of parlayed them into this company. The idea is that I'm passionate about this stuff. I think anyone who's talked to me or ever emailed me can see that this isn't just something that I'm not selling faucets here. That I really don't care about. This is all miniatures that not only have I come up with the ideas for, but I've seen through the production that I'm very excited about. So what you need to do when you market your things is, and what I always tell people, if you think you're marketing too much, you're not doing it enough. And what I mean by that is when you post on a forum or you post on a Facebook group or you send out an email list, I mean, I'm not saying to drive people absolutely crazy here, but people who are interested in your product, about 5% will be on when you post up that message. About maybe 10% will see it. That means you got to do at least 5 or 6 times, different days, talk about different ways. So the people who are actually interested in your product, your miniatures, your
get a chance to see it.
Exactly. If people don't get a chance to see it, then what's the point? You'll never sell anything because it's all about, you have some great websites now. Miniatures page has the news. You have beastsofwar.com, which is starting to show more and more 15mm stuff. I think of some of the earlier 15mm stuff they posted on there, but now they've started to pick it up, which is really cool because that's, I think, one of the largest mainstream websites, as far as I know, anyway. I know you had some websites like Tabletop Gaming News.
Yep. TGN.
Although, they've changed a little bit, so I'm not sure how popular they are as much anymore. The format seems a little bit harder to compete with. And then you have Facebook. Facebook's an amazing thing.
Facebook's fantastic.
We have the 15mm sci-fi group. You recognize the names, you talk to people, you have a fun time. I like to post up not only business stuff, but personal projects. That's part of the fun. Hey, look what I painted today, And you just engage people. You need to do at least something. You need to get your word out there. You need to get news out there and talk about it and show all. You're not doing it to trick people into buying the product because that's not going to work. You're showing the people who would be interested in buying it how cool it looks and that it actually is a quality product. That's what you're doing out there for sure. But that's an important thing for any company. Kickstarter is a great tool for marketing. From Kickstarter. If anything else, for some reason, people love to get the word out about Kickstarter. You're running a Kickstarter, it will get a lot of people who have never seen your stuff before to see it. So that's something to consider if you ever think about doing a Kickstarter instead of doing a traditional line. I'm
sorry, Harold, just as my main concern about the Kickstarter, we've used Kickstarter several times already, me and Josh, and we've built some success off it. But both of our one sort of standing concern about Kickstarter is the sort of ignoring of the local retailer. I was just talking to Josh about it the other day, and there are stockists out there who, they see a brand new board game, for example, Zombicide comes out, or just using that as a rough example, and does extremely well on Kickstarter. It's millions and millions of dollars generated through crowdfunding, and the stockist, your local store gets all excited about it and thinks, yeah, okay, I'm in. This is obviously what people want. They go buy a dozen copies, no one buys it. Right. It sits on the shelf. No one buys it because everyone who's going to buy it's going to buy it through the Kickstarter, get all the freebies and the benefits. It leaves nothing for the retailer. Right.
So. And that's, it's because I don't have things in retail stores at the moment. That's not as big of a concern, but I've seen that over again. You almost need to be if you're going to do gigantic Kickstarters like that, you almost need to be a Kickstarter company, basically, where each new product range becomes a Kickstarter. But Josh actually brought this up in terms of, people not necessarily, it's easy to dislike a company, it's easy to dislike people in uniform, it's easy to dislike a huge faceless corporation, it's not easy to dislike a certain person. If you, it's just like a band or a movie. Like if you're gonna, I don't know how many times this happened to you guys, but you really like an artist and cool stuff, then you realize he's a total jerk. You're a total jerk. Yeah. All of a sudden you're like, you know what? Screw that guy, I'm not listening to him anymore. So another great thing about Facebook, especially with a small company like myself, is that you get a chance to engage with the people, and they realize that no, he's not. Well, most of the time I'm not a jerk, but that this is somebody here who's just doing their best as a hobbyist like everybody else. This isn't my full-time job or anything like that. I'm not sitting in some amazing warehouse with stacks upon stacks of 50mm miniatures yet, but we're just trying to put cool things out there for people to enjoy and paint, play games with. That's what it all comes down to. When we're all making toy soldiers to play with, or toy,
Absolutely.
Whatever they are. They're toys for adults, which is nothing wrong with that.
There's nothing wrong with that.
Well, might say it a different way later, but Kickstarter. Move right on to Kickstarter here. So we were talking about how the Kickstarter. My experience with Kickstarter is that stretch goals and goal creep, where you start building upon, you start expanding on what you initially want to do, kills the Kickstarter and kills any chance of fulfilling on time, or maybe even fulfilling at all. I even had my miniatures pretty much sculpted as soon as the Kickstarter ended. It still took me, I think, 6 to 7 months to get everything done because of the casters. Simply, it took delays, and normally when I'm just making the line, delays are just delays because no one knows about them, because I generally don't push something until it's just about ready. And there are tons of delays, like I talked about earlier. But and it's become so expected now, especially with Kickstarters. You get free items, you get huge discounts, you get stretch goal after stretch goal after stretch goal. When in reality, say I have a Kickstarter for $10,000, and say I get to $12,000. Where's the stretch goal? Where's my next miniature? Well, what you don't realize is out of those $2,000, I maybe get $300 extra because I still got to fulfill all of those things that were promised just for pledging. Then there's a 10% taken off the top, and it just doesn't leave a lot. So you really got to, stretch goals need to be almost start doubling what your initial goal is, because if it's going to cost you $10,000 to get your initial line set up, it's going to probably cost you close to that to get the next line set up. And really, it can be very, counting is very difficult for Kickstarter because you don't really know the shipping costs and the production costs and, all these fees that come into it. There are websites like BackerKit and stuff like that kind of help you out a little bit. And if I was going to do a Kickstarter again, I'd probably go with something like that so I could collect the shipping costs on the back end. So it wouldn't, because if you have shipping costs inside your pledge, then a vast portion of those $10,000 that you thought you raised actually go to shipping. And that's not much you can build miniatures with. So it's just something to be aware of in terms of that.
Oh, sorry, Josh.
I was going to say quickly that on Netherworld's Edge, we actually used BackerKit, and that's super helpful.
Yeah, and in terms of creating the shipping labels and figure out who did what, and Kickstarter has horrible tools for tracking shipping out rewards. I guess Kickstarter is really designed for intangible rewards, like getting a movie produced. And now that they have actual products, they're still not set up to properly track that or do it in a way that's easy for accounting and shipping labels and all that kind of stuff. So I think BackerKit and stuff like that is definitely, I would agree with that, the way to do it.
It's funny, Harold, the way me and Josh have done Kickstarters thus far is
Anton, keep talking, I can hear you, but I'm going to be up off the desk for just a second.
Oh, yeah, sure.
So I can hear you.
Yeah, no worries. We've done everything in our power to make sure that the entire ranges have been designed, molded, cast, even painted, presented before even launching the Kickstarter. Because of these unseen sort of expenses cropping up, we wanted to be in the best possible manageable position to sort of have as much foresight as possible before we actually went live with the Kickstarter. Now, I've been attacked personally by other people over the internet about this. Oh, that's not the way you use Kickstarters. And it's like, well, yeah, it is, because we're still funding the initial outlay out of our own pocket to start with, to design these lines, to get them up and running, to present a finished product to the customers, and as well as protect ourselves in every possible aspect along the way to ensure that we deliver in a timely fashion the best possible Kickstarter product we can.
Absolutely.
But it's just the way we do it, and so far it's worked well for us. Would you say, Josh?
Yeah, I think it's also a little easier for us than Harold because we do control a lot of those costs. We control the sculpting costs and the molding costs and the manufacturing costs, and so we do know those ahead of time, and delays are our delays, not somebody else's, right? So
right, and and it's definitely, I agree with that. The idea is to have as much done as possible beforehand, and if only to prove to the Kickstarter backers that you're
legit.
Right, you have this amazing miniature. Look at it. This is the style. This is what you're going to get. Something very similar to this. It's going to continue, and I think that's, if you can do that, that's best not only for you because you have everything. You limit your delays, but you've also, you've really you've shown what you can do, and you have here. Now I need to make this really happen. This is what you can do. Everyone's on the same page. Unfortunately, I just saw my family drive down the driveway. So in about 3 minutes here, I'm going to have a crazy 3-year-old jumping all over the place.
Hey, that's cool.
That's cool. We had a
right now.
Yeah. We have a hard out in like 6 minutes anyway because I've got to head back over to my office. So.
Well, that's cool.
Maybe we should wrap this up and let Harold say some final things.
Yeah, and I mean, Harold, we're going to get you on again anyway, mate. So this is just your warm up.
No, it was great. I really appreciate you guys letting me, talk and babble on.
Mate, you're officially a member of the Brotherhood now. So
excellent, and
subscribe.
Yes, absolutely. Please subscribe. These videos I've been watching, they're a lot of fun, and ClearHorizonMiniatures.com. That's obviously, I'm going to plug it just at least once there. But please, if you're thinking about starting a range, if you have any questions about starting a range, need any references, anything like that, just email me, sales@ClearHorizonMiniatures.com. I'm happy to discuss anything. I usually respond very quickly. If not, then I'll try to get back to you as quick as I can. But anybody has any questions about anything, I'm happy to just discuss hobby stuff all the time. And keep an eye out. We have some really cool stuff coming up. And then I'm not going to talk too much about it, but keep an eye, especially for early next year. We have some really cool stuff. I think we'll really expand 15mm and be a really cool thing for a lot of people.
Yeah, and sculptors out there, Harold's legit. Look after him.
I appreciate that.
And I think, gentlemen, that's it for this particular episode. I think we're going to get Big John Bear Ross on our next one, so that'll be interesting.
Guy.
Yeah, another top guy. So
it'll be terrible.
you former U.S. Marine. He's a I won't say, but I look forward to having him on. But Harold, mate, thank you very much for your time, buddy. It's been great to finally meet you in the flesh, so to speak, in the digital. And mate, I hope you have a great rest of your Sunday and a great week, and we'll talk very soon.
Talk soon, everybody. Thank you.
Thanks, Josh.
Yeah.
Thanks, Jonathan.
Thanks, guys.
Hey, guys.
Have a good night.
Guys, thank you everyone for listening. Till next time.